Randa, thank you so much for speaking to us on TRT World. It's been more than a
Thank you.
week now after this attack by Hamas and the retaliation from Israel. How do you feel watching this all play out?
I feel as a Palestinian in the diaspora, the daughter of a refugee, the first thing I feel is extreme anger because this is all preventable. Palestinians have been saying for decades now that the international community must stop holding Israel to a different standard to the rest of the world, that it has granted Israel impunity to breach international law, to commit its war crimes unabated, unashamed. And we have seen the escalation of the ferocity in which Israel breaches international law and imposes its unbelievably violent apartheid settler colonial regime, not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, against Israeli Arabs and against refugees. And so it's intense anger that this has been allowed to happen, and that Palestinian voices begging for the intervention of the international community continue to be ignored.
Israel has described what's happened by Hamas, this attack, as its own 9/11. And we all know, as history has shown us, how well that was handled, the ramifications of which we are still seeing today. In your latest book, called Coming of Age in the War on Terror, you write about young people who have grown up in a world of polarized politics and the rise of the far right. Is what we're seeing play out in Gaza and the global reaction somewhat of a manifestation of that?
Absolutely. I think that what we are seeing is the same rhetoric, the same policies, the same racialization of Muslims, of Arabs, of Palestinians, of people of color in the name of perpetuating white supremacy, because this is at the heart of the Western world's response to the decimation and atrocities and the murder and massacres of Palestinians. The complete lack of empathy, and not only just that, but inversing the relationship such that Palestinians are presented as the aggressors and the Israelis are presented as the victims. And we see this time and time again in the war on terror, whereby Western regimes are painted as the saviors of the uncivilized world of Arabs and Muslims and people of color. And we're just seeing this play out again. And it really reinforces how after 2 decades, not only has nothing been learned, but we are seeing an escalation in what was hitherto done in ways that perhaps were done with a little bit more subtlety, but now are done with absolutely no shame, because you cannot witness what is happening and then go and blast your buildings with the colors of the Israeli flag. And how can you do that if you are not sending a clear statement that we are siding with the oppressor?
You know, a large part of what we are talking about is what people have described as apartheid by Israel. Apartheid in South Africa, one of the ways that it eventually ended was massive global pressure and sanctions on the apartheid government. It took years, though, for that to actually result in freedom for the people of South Africa. Is there political will then from the international community? And I'm not just talking about the West here, but the rest of the world as well, that kind of political will to enforce the same kind of pressure on Israel to stop what it's doing against Palestinians and people in Gaza?
I think that we are seeing that, for example, across the Arab and Muslim world, we are seeing time and time again that dictators and totalitarian regimes are just towing the US line and basically serving empire. But what gives Palestinians hope and continues to fuel their resistance is the fact that mass mobilization on the streets is there. And we see that it's thousands upon hundreds of thousands of people around the world who are standing in solidarity with Palestine, not with Israel. And so when it comes to the ruling elite, yes, there is no political will there yet. The kind of political will that we saw with Ukraine and with Russia and with the swift implementation of international law. But we on the street around the world will continue to speak out until solidarity with Israel is understood as a bad investment, because we know that that's how states come to the table. And we will continue to fight and raise our voices. And I think that even though Palestinians are being massacred now and the situation is increasingly more grim, Palestinians continue to feel that they will never stop resisting, and they are not victims, they are survivors, and they will continue to survive, and our powerful movement only continues to grow.
Absolutely. Randa Abdel-Fattah, live there from Sydney. Thank you so much for your insight and your thoughts.